Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, our weekly virtual happy hour with industry professionals. I'm Dev Janki, Artistic Director of Live and in Color. We are an artist-serving organization dedicated to developing new stage works that promote and celebrate diversity. Please consider making a donation to Live and in Color today to support our artists who continue to make socially inclusive and bold work during this time. Just go to liveandincolor.org for more information. Also, Live and in Color is currently accepting musical submissions for playwrights, composers, and lyricists of color and other underrepresented communities interested in developing their new musical. Submissions are due March 31st, so that's coming up. So make sure to go to our website and check out how to submit. Now, grab a cocktail and start leaving your questions for our fabulous guests in the comments. Please welcome two of Broadway's best musical directors. Combined, they have worked on over 25 shows. Please say hello to the brilliant Mary-Mitchell Campbell and Zane Mark. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Cheers. Welcome, you two. Thank you for joining me. How are you both?
Doing well.
Good.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm excellent. So happy to see both of your beautiful faces. Where are you joining me from?
I am joining
Mary?
you. I'm joining you from outside of New York City at Bear Mountain near West Point.
And I'm in lovely Brooklyn, New York.
Love it. Zane, is Brooklyn home for you originally? Is that where you?
Born and raised.
All right.
Born and raised.
And Mary, where's home for you originally?
Originally North Carolina.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Lots of things to ask you, but I always start out by asking, I guess, like what originally brought you into the industry? Where did the seed start for this showbiz thing? Mary, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I grew up playing the piano in church, and my father worked at a radio station. And so I was like deeply into listening to the radio and playing by ear. And then I started taking piano lessons when I was 8 and got really into classical music and sort of combined both. And then when I think it was 16 was when I decided that I wanted to do musical theater because I saw a performance of a show and I thought, oh, music can be a storyteller. And I just thought that was the best way to make music. And so from then on, I've been obsessed with theater.
Uh-huh. And Zane?
My father was a musician, reed player, and did a lot of like big band work in the beginning. And then I think the very first show he ever did on Broadway was the original company of Hair. And so on like Thanksgiving or Christmas or those kind of holidays where there was a big dinner, he would scoop me and my brothers up and take us to the theater. And I'm like, so this is Broadway. And if you can imagine all the crazy things that were going on backstage at the original company of Hair, I'm like, I'm in. And then the second Broadway show I went to see was Fiddler on the Roof. And I'm like, something's different here. This is not the same show I saw. So there you go. That was my.
So Hair was your very first Broadway show, huh?
No. It was my father. I'm not that old, man. My father's very first show.
No. But the first show you saw.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
And oddly enough, like, I don't know how many years earlier, but later, my daughter actually did a company of Hair in the West End. So it's just like a weird kind of full circle thing for us.
Wow, it's amazing. You both have taken on so many different roles in the industry: music directing, orchestrating, arranging, composing. For our viewers who aren't in the biz, can you speak a little bit to the what all the different roles do? Music directing as opposed to orchestrating, as opposed to arranging. Either of you jump in, Mary.
Sure. Although Zane, I'm going to make you do this with me.
Yeah.
Music directing is typically what I like to now call the CEO of all things musical in a Broadway show, meaning that you are like responsible for everything. The buck stops with you, and you basically train and teach the cast. You enforce the standards that are set by the creative team, and you do the same with the orchestra, and often you conduct the show, but all musical decisions come from you. And then I'll let you talk about orchestration, Zane.
Well, just to dovetail on that, you're not the CEO per se. There's a team, because you don't just go in and change the music that the composers actually wrote. Yeah. So there's a little input, little birdie fluttering around at all times. But so now you have the music, and you've figured out how big your band or your orchestra is going to be. So you just have the piano music. So now you have to create drum music, guitar music, trumpet music, harp music, kazoo music. And then it has to go to an arranger. And then the arranger just says, all right, I want the trumpet to play this. I want the guitar player to play that. And then it goes, sometimes the arranger and the orchestrator could be the same person, but the orchestrator is the person that actually puts it on a large sheet of music and then hands it off to someone called the copyist, who writes out the individual parts for each guy in the band to play. And then we break it down to what? The musicians? What comes after that? Well, there's different arrangers. So there might be a vocal arranger in the group. There might be somebody that, and sometimes that falls on the musical director's lap. Sometimes there's a dance music arranger, and I do a lot of that stuff, but sometimes that falls on the musical director's lap. And depending on the show, there could be a whole bunch of different things that happen, but kind of like what Mary-Mitchell said, the musical director is the one that kind of calling the shots, not looking at the composer.
Well, always with the composer, sure.
Exactly. I want to jump right in. Mary, as we both know, there is a severe lack of female representation among Broadway's musical directors. You have been such a trailblazer in that regard. Who did you look up to when you were coming up in the business? Do you have any mentors or people that you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, female mentors, I would say, even though I didn't get to work with them really, but I just absolutely was inspired by Linda Twine and Kristen Blodgett. Were the two that and Janita Sori were the people that I sort of coming up through the industry was like looking at, but my mentors were actually men. The people who actually mentored me were men who really, I think, cared about diversity, and men who really went out of their way to make sure to train me, which was, super invaluable.
Yeah. And Zane, I mean, obviously your dad, but were there any other people that sort of inspired you to take this journey?
Well, as I got a little older in high school, actually, my father was doing a show called Bubbling Brown Sugar. And there's a lot of big band music in that show. And I'm not exactly sure why, but he enrolled me in music copying classes. And back in the day, you got a piece of paper and you got a pen with some ink in it, and that's how you actually wrote out the parts. Now we enter it into a computer, press a couple of buttons, and boom. But that's how I kind of got my start. And in those days, the musical director, the arrangers, all of these guys were my father's friends because he was working with them. So there was one guy, Danny Holgate, and there was another guy who was the musical director for Bubbling Brown Sugar, and another guy, Neil Tate, who was one of the arrangers and copyists. So I worked with those two guys a lot, and I learned even more from them outside of my father.
Wow. Zane,
yes.
You co-wrote the Tony and Grammy nominated show, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk.
Ooh, graphics.
Show. I saw it like 4 times when it was on Broadway. It was so good. How did you get involved with that project initially?
Well, originally it was done originally it was supposed to be a workshop down at the Public Theater, and Darryl Waters, who was, we kind of tag team, but anyway, George Wolfe had asked him to do the project. So it's a workshop, Public Theater, no one's getting a lot of money. So, he was still keeping his other job playing for Eartha Kitt. And he called me up and said, hey man, I got this other gig, I'm doing it, I can't be there all the time, could you sub for me? And I'm like, sure. And then I guess he looked at the work that was going to be, he said, it's not a sub thing, can we like co-tag team this project? And I'm like, sure, that'll give me 3 more weeks of unemployment and then I'm good, and I haven't looked back yet and haven't been on unemployment yet since. So I'm good. So that was how we started with Noise Funk. And it was like, I think we were 3 months in a room with nothing. And we had our first preview 3 months later. We just built the whole show in the public theater live. And that was one of the best experiences of my life. And then a couple of months later, after we finished our sold out run at the public, I mean, every single show was sold out. We moved over to Broadway, the Ambassador Theater.
And I think, that show was so groundbreaking. I don't think Broadway had ever seen anything like it at that time. It was so exciting. Maybe it's due a revival sometime.
Your lips to God's ears.
Yes. Mary, you've worked on so many incredible shows as well. And you have said before that working on the 2006 revival of The Musical Company was a major turning point in your career. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, completely. That was just a crazy roller coaster of an adventure. John Doyle was the director who does actor-musician musicals. And at the time, that one was an actor-musician musical. And I really was trying to wrap my mind around what an actor-musician musical was and how it functioned and how to orchestrate for it, because I was tasked with that aspect. And he had a lot of vision, but it was a lot of like, okay, how much can I really change the original? It's so iconic in people's minds, that original 1970 version of Company. And so I was sort of anxious about making changes and who was going to be mad. And there were people that were mad, but that's what art does. It pushes the envelope. But the experience for me was great. I sort of went through a process early on where I decided to go with, because he had to see everything before it was approved. But I was sort of like, instead of asking him about every single decision, I was just like, I'm just going to make bold choices and then present them. And if he hates them, we'll change them. And so that was sort of the mentality I went into that with Sondheim. And it was therefore very terrifying.
Well, the end result was spectacular. I mean, it really was. And it's forever, it was recorded, right? So people can still see it.
It's on. PBS recorded it as part of their Great Performances series. And so actually for the first time during the pandemic, I watched it for the first time since 2006. And I was like, oh, wow. When you look back on pictures and it's so different than you thought it was. And you're like,
it's not bad.
I was like, oh, that's okay. Like, yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, okay. I'm not embarrassed about that. That's good. Like, you never know. Like with your work, you just
it was incredible. It
was really fun to work on. It was really fun, and I made lifelong friendships out of it, including Elizabeth Stanley, who starring in Jagged Little Pill this past season, and she was, our April, and it's been fun to watch her career.
Yeah. Zane, back in 2014, which seems like so long ago, you were one of 4 Black artists to be working in an executive position on a Broadway show. At the time, it seemed like such a huge accomplishment, and yet we know there's still so much more progress needed. How do you think we can continue to create more access to BIPOC artists, especially in the field of musical directing?
I think with just about any issue, period, the more communication, more conversation we have about it, the better. I'm going to step out here, and I don't think anyone is saying, I don't want to see any Black people on stage. I mean, conducting a show or directing a show. I don't want any person of color in my pit. I don't think anyone is saying that. Whether that's happening subconsciously or not, I'm not going to walk down that road. The bottom line is there needs to be some more representation. So now how we get about walking down that street and opening up that conversation, there's a couple of different roads that we can go through. As far as the music department is concerned, myself, Mary-Mitchell, and I think 14, 15 other people have created an organization called MUSE. MUSE, Musicians United for Social Equity. And hey, look at it, more graphics. You guys are all
wow,
fancy. Good segue.
Very impressed. Very impressed. And so you can check us out, museonline.org, and see what we're trying to do. But we have the cream of the crop of musical directors, orchestrators, arrangers, composers, male and female. And we're trying to attack it from a couple of different angles. From the student level, we're trying to, let me back up. The argument for a long time was, I don't know where these BIPOC musicians are. I don't know where the BIPOC arrangers are. I don't know where. So our goal was to create a membership where you could dial in, go in and look at our directory and say, oh, here's a XYZ. I need a trumpet player in Cleveland. And you can pull that up. Or I need someone that just writes musical theater lyrics in wherever, and you can pull that up and look at it. So the bigger that database becomes, the better for us. And as a member, you would get those perks.
Yeah.
But if you're a student, just, breaking into theater or thinking about breaking into theater or coming to New York to do something of that effect, we eventually are going to offer mentorship programs. So we're in the process of trying to set that up this month, actually. We're in the process of setting up master classes. We do live events at least once a month and invite anybody and everybody that identifies BIPOC to join us, join the membership crew, and see what we have to offer. And if it's nothing more than just networking, that could be good for you. You could post a job there, or somebody just posted recently, we need what was it, Mary? They needed some kind of director of something or another on the board. It just posted recently, but it's this, and all of our members can just go periodically. Anything up there I'm interested in? Yes, no, and move on. So our goal is, there's different levels to it. But in doing that, if you start out as an assistant to Stephen Aremus or Joseph Joubert or one of these heavyweight guys, a lot of those people have turned into being musical directors in their own right, and then being the big CEO, as Mary-Mitchell called them. So our goal is to mentor, nourish, educate, and never let that argument of, I don't know where they are, be an excuse anymore.
Yeah. So wonderful. Can you talk a little bit more about how people can get involved? Obviously, they can go to the website and find out more information, but both for members, but also people that may want to help the organization. Can you talk a little bit about how people can?
Started, everybody needs money.
Yes.
And there's ways to start this. So you can always join and donate money. You do have to be identified BIPOC to become a member of MUSE, because that's kind of what our mission statement is all about. But if you want to donate your time, your energy, go to the site and sign up and say, hey, I have X. And it could be a space, it could be a whole bunch of things that we could possibly use. But money's the easiest one to,
Of course.
Always money.
Always money.
You can also amplify, MUSE on social media. You can tell your friends about it. You can make sure that other BIPOC artists are aware of it, that people are using it to find new talent. If you're somebody who is a person who hires people, check out the people that we have profiles in our directory, because there's some amazingly talented people there.
There sure are. I mean, obviously at Live and in Color, we take our submissions, and I'm always, right now we can only produce 1 or 2 or 3 projects a year, but the amount of talent out there is just staggering. I'm so happy that you are gathering them all together in one place where people can find them. Mary, MUSE is a project that grew out from A-Step, Artists Striving to End Poverty, another incredible organization you founded 15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago.
God, I remember when we were starting it.
I remember you and I. Yes, I remember early days. We're still here drinking.
It's wonderful. Drinking. How has your philanthropic work influenced your professional career path? Oh,
that's a great question. I think it's influenced a lot about what I care about. It's influenced, I will say, also starting a nonprofit, running a nonprofit, there's so much business. I always joked that with people that I was a piano performance major, and I needed to, anytime anything would come up, I don't know about you, Dev, but anytime anything would come up business oriented, I would be like, I was a piano performance major. I need somebody to help me here. So, I did my own studying, but I do think it has helped me understand the entertainment industry just from a business standpoint. But I also think it's really taught me the value of storytelling. I mean, one of the big things that I think is so important, and why your organization is so important, why MUSE is so important, why Maestra, which is another organization that I'm involved in promoting women, is so important, is because it's just, the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we are told about ourselves are the things that shape us, and how we tell our own stories, how we lift up people's stories, and how we make sure that those stories are getting out there, because one story can't be the defining thing. And so it's like, the more diversity, the better. So I feel like, one of the big things that I've learned through the years, and A-Step works in different countries and has a lot of programs in New York City, with a lot of really interesting and really intensely marginalized communities, is the importance of art, and the importance of the joy that art brings, and the way that it connects us and tells our stories.
Yeah, so wonderful. Our mission at Live and in Color is to connect diverse communities like you're talking about, to create new stage works. What does having an inclusive working environment mean to both of you? We always ask this question to our guests, and I'm always interested to know what that means to you, because there's so much discussion about it.
Having lunch with a woman today that works in film, editor primarily, and her response was, and I could mold that into my response, is that for so long, all of the stories were told through white men. And that's cool, but there are other stories, there are other lenses, and there are other viewpoints that could and should be heard. Mm-hmm. And so, and you might actually enjoy that. So, I mean, if your favorite food is chocolate chip ice cream, that's great. But every single day of chocolate chip ice cream, you might never find out pralines and cream, or this one over there, or whatever your thing is. And there are other stories, like Mitchell just said, there are other stories to be told, other experiences to be taught. And I think the more we know about each other, we're not going to be afraid of each other or afraid of the unknown. And we're a little bit more ready to sit down and say, what do you think? And I think once we do that, we open up so many doors and knock down so many barriers. And it's just to be able to speak to somebody else without worrying about being politically correct and stepping on toes, just having an honest discussion about how do we fix the problem, whatever the problem is. I think most of us are too afraid to speak out. Yeah. Or don't have a venue where they feel safe to speak out. Or just they're afraid to speak out. And that's not just with music or theater or, feeding the homeless. It's just in general. And if you're part of a minority, you're kind of like scared a lot of the times. And it's by speaking out that you find that you're really not a smaller minority, and you actually may be the majority, but you never know. So I think the dialogue and the conversation between anybody that's willing to sit and listen is good. Even if you don't end up agreeing with them when it's all over, at least I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Try to move forward from there.
Mary, anything to say?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Zane said, as usual. That's usually how our conversations go. I'm like, yep, that's right. He laughs because it's true. I think inclusivity, to build inclusivity, you have to have communication and you have to have trust. And those are things that I have really placed even more a priority on in the last year. I would also just say, take a look at who you're surrounded by. And if it's homogenous, figure out how to break that up in whatever it is. Zane made a really good point recently where he was talking about the fact that we typically hire our friends, people that we know, people we have trust with, people that we know are going to be with us in a ditch in the middle of a really hard situation, that they're going to have our backs. And so if you're going to be hiring your friends, then make new friends, get out there and make new friends so that you can have a more inclusive environment and a more diverse group of people to work from.
So great. I think we have some questions from our viewers. Let's see what they got to say. So Sophie says, what does music directing look like during the pandemic? Oh,
that's a great question, Sophie. I'll speak first on this. I'll just say it's a wild ride. I've done several projects where I have music directed over Zoom. And I love Zane's facial expression right now. And then I've done a couple things where I've gotten to go into, studios and be in person. But, the COVID testing process is just incredibly extreme. And so going through that has been, it's just a whole new way of scheduling and looking at the world. And I've gotten really good at dealing with remote recording from instrumentalists. And, we're all learning how to mix and in our own sort of way. Mix together tracks. And so it's been a wild ride, a lot of new skill set learning, similar to, I think, what actors are going through when they're like, and so I'm going to be my own, stage manager, and I'm going to set up my background, and I'm also going to be my audio engineer, and I'm going to do all the things.
Exactly.
So I'll say over the last 5-10 years, I've been acting primarily as an arranger. But in doing that, I have to record stuff, bring it in to the choreographer, because a lot of times it's hard to explain what I hear in my head on just the piano. So I have to record stuff. So I have a nice little studio down here. And so a lot of people have been writing and trying to develop ideas during this pandemic. So when the smoke clears and the doors are open, the floodgates, hey, come on, let's go. They want to have their projects ready. So I've been creating a couple of projects, or better yet, the demos for these projects, so that they can present them. And that's from like Broadway bound stuff to cruise ship shows. They just need the music. So in my little pandemic world, I've been creating demos. A lot of fun. And there's a lot of sitting around as far as being in front of other musicians and playing with other musicians. For me, not that much. And I usually work by myself anyway, but I'm looking forward to the time where I can get back in the room and, be with some other guys. And
Yes. We have another question. So Lori says, what is the first piece of music that had an impact on you?
Wow, that's such an amazing question that I will say I was a child of pop music. So I was listening to the radio, and I'm going to give two artists that were like my early inspirations, which are relatively diverse. One of them is Stevie Wonder and the other one is Carole King. Those were the two that I sort of like grew up on.
Yeah.
Guy, way back in the day, they would do these they call them radio shows. So there was a guy, a DJ called I think Murray the K. Anyway, but there were these big theaters in New York, and one was the Brooklyn Fox, and they would bring in all of the artists, kind of like what they would do at the Apollo. And my father would play in all of these bands. So they would always make a record, and that DJ station would sell the record. So we always had the best of whatever's on the pop radio coming to our house. So I had a lot of influence there. My father, being a jazz musician, there was a lot of jazz music in our house. So I guess my earliest influence were Duke Ellington. The vocalists would be Ella Fitzgerald. Further along down the line, as far as piano playing, there were like a billion and one Chick Corea, Oscar Peterson, none of them that I can come close to playing like, but then there were other musicians like Herbie Hancock when he did his whole electric thing, the Rocket, and for me, to groove and dance to, but I think what was important to me was the simplicity of it all and how it didn't have to be a whole bunch of stuff going on, and it was still grooving and still sitting in the pocket. So that affected me a certain way. And that was only one small aspect of what Herbie Hancock would do. But I found myself kind of leaning in that direction. How can I just make this groove and hit? And it doesn't have to be dance floor grooving. It could be, a waltz. It could be anything. But how do we make that hit with just the bare minimum? And then if we need to add something, we add it. So anytime I write anything, it's not a whole bunch of crap going on. Or better yet, if there is, all of that crap has a place and it needs to be there. So that's my
Those are all great people to be inspired by. I have one more question. Let's see what we got. Shalina says, who are your favorite collaborators?
Zane, you go first.
You mentioned Noise Funk, so Daryl Waters, major music collaborator with me. We just work well together, and y'all can Google Daryl Waters. He's a monster. But I mean, me and Daryl Waters work so well together that he's actually orchestrated shows for me that I was the musical director on, and he never heard the show. We were never in the same city. That's how well we work together. I think I work well with George Wolfe, the director. I work well with my daughter, Crystal Jo. We got a lot of songs together. So different people, different avenues. Mary.
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a few as well. I would say, obviously, John Doyle and Stephen Sondheim are sort of, a part of my DNA. Cy Coleman was my first mentor, so I was like pretty deep in that world. But I would say, I've had amazing times working with Andrew Lippa, with Matt Sklar, with Tom Kitt, Georgia Stitt. Like, there's just a lot of people that I have been lucky enough to be able to create with.
Yeah. Both of you have had, like I said, amazing careers, and I'm so happy you joined me. We actually are out of time. I told you it would go by fast. But before we go, for our audience, please consider supporting our organization by going to liveandincolor.org to donate. All money raised goes towards our amazing artists and developing their new work. Also, be sure to tune in to Be Our Guest next week when we talk to actress, singer, dancer, choreographer, theater director, and author from such shows as Flower Drum Song and A Chorus Line, the incredible Broadway legend Bjork Lee. I'm so excited to have her on the show. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Thank you, Mary and Zane, for joining me. Audience, please go check out MUSE. They're doing incredible work. They're so needed right now. And I look forward for some sort of collaboration between Live and in Color and MUSE moving forward. Will one of you, before we go, lead us in a little toast to say goodbye?
Sure. Are you going to do it, Zane? Okay, I'll just say I'm going to toast to making good art with an inclusive group of people in a new landscape that comes back soon.
Cheers! Cheers to that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next week.
It's time to change the story. Come on and change this tune. See how the future looks.